Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have construction needs? Maybe you want to get a patio built, or maybe you need your roof done. Check out K&H Construction. They're a local company in Waxahachie, and they'll get you taken care of. Let them know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest is Miss Brownell Landrum. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I ran across, in looking for guests, I ran across you. You popped up, and it was so much talk about reincarnation and stuff. And I always found that topic very interesting. So I wanted to have you on to talk to my audience about it and
Sure.
your experience with that. Can you give me a brief bio on you?
Yeah, I'm an author. I'm also a songwriter, screenwriter. I like to say I'm an explorer of metaphysical mysteries. I like looking at things that are intriguing and that might answer some questions that we may have in our lives. So I like to keep looking and keep exploring. I launched a trilogy last year that actually hit #1 yesterday in 3 different categories. So that is the most exciting thing. Yes, it's called We Meet
Yeah.
Again. And I'll tell you more about that. I'm sure you're going to ask me about that. I also have a series of short stories that are free. So I want to make sure you offer it to your listeners and viewers that are pretty autobiographical. This is the most autobiographical I've ever gotten. And it's called The End, a Love Story to the Universe.
You
And
call
then,
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Anyways, and then I have also a new book called The Hero's Playbook. It actually looks like that. And it's for the hero in all of us. So it's an exploration of the hero's journey. If you know about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, I got lots of different books and lots of different activities and interests and everything.
You've covered a lot of ground. Your books, they go from all kinds of, you got children's books, I think. You've done a little bit of everything, and that's a well-lived life from what I see, a very well-lived
Oh,
life.
thank you.
But you call yourself an explorer of metaphysical mysteries. What first sparked you to that curiosity about reincarnation and the deeper why behind life's events?
Yeah, I really think it is all about the why. In fact, my first book was about the why, which we can get into in a bit. But to answer your question, as far as the metaphysical stuff, I grew up as a Christian, as an Episcopalian. So if you know that denomination, it's the most open-minded, probably. They're like looking at all kinds of new things. And so I always grew up with an open mind, but not, I always felt like, oh, unless I was taught it, it wasn't something I could believe. And then when I got maybe in my 20s, probably late 20s, I started kind of hearing stuff about reincarnation and some of these metaphysical things. And so I got really curious. And a lot of people, probably closer to my age, read some Shirley MacLaine or saw some Shirley MacLaine stuff, and that opened their mind too. And I was having a recurring dream over and over again. And I thought, wonder what that is. And that's often the first opening for some people is, wait a minute, you don't always dream the same dream. And it was pretty explicit. And so I actually went to a therapist and had what's called a past life regression. And it was so powerful because I felt had been in this lifetime, you probably think I'm crazy, but
No.
I've been a young, like teenage boy in Belgium, I think. And it was 200 or 300 years ago. And I was captured and imprisoned in that lifetime. And I died of starvation in prison. And I felt my body changing while I was going through this regression. I physically felt those things of that body. And then I subsequently actually met a man who had been my brother in that lifetime. So that was pretty interesting stuff. So it just opened up a whole world of, like, why are we here? Like you said, the why. Why are we here? And to me, reincarnation answered so many questions. Like, why would somebody have a short life versus somebody a longer life? Why would somebody have difficulties? And when you believe in reincarnation, you can believe, wait a minute, I may have had lots of different lives, and some were short and some were long, some of a different race, some of a different gender, some of a different nationality, different religions. And then it starts explaining a lot. So for me, it just helped that. And as a writer, it's just fun to write. I'll just be honest. It's a blast. So,
Slandrum, how did you come up with the clarity of that? Like the Belgian boy, how did that? Because maybe people have felt there might have been a past life for me, but how did you come up with the Belgian boy in prison? How did that come about?
it came about that I kept having these recurring dreams of starvation was the first kind of thing that happened in
Wow.
the dream. And it was just this, and like this imprisonment and all these kinds of things in the dream. And that's why I went to get what's called a past life regression, which I'll explain in case people don't know.
Yeah.
But there'll be a therapist who will take you into kind of a hypnotic state. You're super relaxed. You're not like doing a squawk like a chicken or something like you might have seen on a stage in Las Vegas, because I did see that one time. But you start and they'll say, okay, let's take you back, and you go back into this life, and it says, okay, now let's take you back to before this lifetime into another lifetime. And with the right kind of regression therapist, they won't lead you on, but they will say, what do you see now? Where are you? What's happening? And then after that, just memories came and these feelings came of what that was like. So I don't know how better to explain it than that, though.
No, how have you processed that? Because that's a lot. That's a lot that to look back and you say you've been reincarnated, and it's a boy in Belgium that was locked up and imprisoned and starved. And how did you deal with that because that's like life-changing. This is a life-changing event you're talking about.
Yeah,
you're very comfortable with it, but it's life-changing.
Yeah, it is. And what to add to the story, if you want to know a little bit more about the story, is what was happening at the time is the village, there was some sort of war going on. And honestly, I don't know which one. Some regressions in this will get really specific. What year is it? Where are you wearing? Who are you? And some are more like, what's the message here? What's going on? What's the lesson for today? And so it was more the latter than getting too many specifics. But there was some war going on, and I thought I was hot stuff. I was like 14 or something, and all the men were gone to war. So I was the oldest man, and I was taking care of the village, of the women and the children. And so when the enemy came to the area, I thought I was cool, and I thought I could save these people. And that's what got me imprisoned. One of the things that was interesting about that is, as I mentioned, I met a man in this lifetime who had been my brother, and he was in that lifetime the same amount of years younger than he is in this lifetime. And his life is one where he is the heir to a fortune, however you want to define a fortune, and is similar to that boy that he was my brother, because when I got imprisoned, he was the oldest male, and he was like 8. And he had all this responsibility that was too much for him. And in this lifetime, he's having the same kind of lesson and experience. He felt like I had abandoned him in that lifetime. And so I found out years later, he and I had a soul contract. I don't know if you ever heard of what those are, but we had a soul contract to meet each other in this lifetime and to learn a lesson together. It's wild stuff. The way I look at it is, even if all of the things I just told you are made up, they're just imaginary. If there's a lesson in it, then I'm getting the memory, I'm getting the experience for a reason. And if you believe it could be answered on a psychology level, like psychologists could say, you had that feeling or you're having that vision because you're supposed to learn something now. If you believe in a spiritual life, then you might believe that a higher power is giving you a message to learn something, right? It depends on where you think that's coming from. Does that all make sense, or do you think I'm a little?
No, I don't. Remember, my show is about my guests, and I don't make judgments on people. This is a lived experience. This is something that you are saying that, and so I would never belittle or think anything like that about my guests. It's cool. It's different. It's interesting. What has been, because since you cover this, and I believe you got a podcast too, since you cover this, what has been like the most compelling reincarnation story that really blew your mind that you've ran into?
Oh, wow. Nobody's ever asked me that. The most compelling reincarnation story. Wow. I just told you mine, which was a pretty big one.
That was a big
yeah. My podcast, just to explain, is that it's basically stories. So it's not an interview, but it's stories. So people who have a story, they'll write a story, we'll record it, and then you just go listen to stories. It's called Life is a Trip, Reincarnation and Afterlife Stories. I think the most compelling story, and so on there, we have all kinds of stories, and they can be fictional or factual. Like we have somebody who wrote a really funny comedic story about Hamlet's ghost that's really clever. And then we have some really, oh, wow, this person met their connection with the person they married in this lifetime, but then what their soul history was and how that explained a lot. And then there's, like I said, there's fictional stories and factual ones. I think the most powerful stories that spoke to me, I don't know if you've ever heard of a writer called Michael Newton, but he was a PhD, so he's Dr. Michael Newton, and he regressed people to the between lives, like what happens between lifetimes, or what I call the upstairs. And those were mind blowing to me. Those were the ones that, like, wow, I never really knew what happens on the other side and what how it all works up there. And he did literally tens of thousands of regressions. He had lots and lots of data of what people saw. And so that, I think that's the thing that really changed my life, maybe even the most.
Oh no, that is, it sounds like just such a cool journey that you've
Yeah.
been through. And how did you get into writing these books? Because you wrote some fiction books, but how did you incorporate stuff like that to get more understanding in these books that you've written?
Yeah, there's a couple of aspects of looking at the fiction. One is you don't have to believe in reincarnation to enjoy my stories. You don't have to believe in time travel to watch Back to the Future, right? And a lot of times people find that reading fiction makes them open up their mind to something. Like, you might not have ever picked up a book on time travel that was nonfiction, but you can watch Back to the Future and you're like, oh, I wonder if that would ever be true and how would that work? And the same is true with my novels. The one that I launched last year, like I said, that became number one yesterday, is about a famous couple from history who is reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world. So it's a little Da Vinci Code, a little Outlander. It's a romantic love story, but then it's also this big, huge mystery. And they go through 5 different lifetimes. So that was really fun to write. If you've ever written anything that's a love story or whatever, you read one and you see a movie, okay, the whole story is how they get together and then they're together and then the story's over. Here you can reintroduce them in other lifetimes. So you can say, okay, we liked them now, but then who might they have been in the 1500s in Austria? And if those lifetimes all have a thread of this big mystery, then that was just so much fun to write.
Now, this is that We Meet Again series that you're doing, right? And
Yes.
you've
Yeah.
you've wrote that into a screenplay already, you said?
Yes, I started out writing it as a television series. And
Mhm.
it's funny because it's been years in the making. It takes time to do these. And now I wrote some things in between. But I started out writing that way. And back then, this is before, really, even though it feels like it's been forever, it hasn't been only been that long, that places like Netflix will have shorter series, right? It used to be 13 episodes. So you had to write for 13 episodes. And now it's like you could do 10, you could do 8. I don't know. Some things do 3, some things do 5. Then I decided I'm going to write it as a novel. I wrote the screenplays and then I adapted them to a novel. And then I organized the novel so that it's designed to be adaptable. There's 10 chapters. Each chapter would be an episode of a TV series. So that was really fun to do because it's like you have a cliffhanger, you have a complete story in each chapter, but then they lead to the next story. Yeah, that was really fun. So I'd love to get it optioned for television and write the screenplays for it.
I
Yeah.
hope that happens, and I will be one of the first to watch it. Sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Did your life experience, that is that what was the motivation for this? Because it sounds like you've been working on this for a while
Yeah,
throughout, and then you left it and came back to it. Was your life kind of the inspiration for this? The life event about learning about reincarnation?
certainly there's always some part of yourself in a story. And I did feel really inspired by the famous couple from history. And so I felt the man in the story, and that the famous man was with me a lot on that. So in that regard, absolutely. I felt like he was like, even though if you knew about who it was, and I'll just tease you and just say Middle Ages Italian, so you can maybe put some pieces together, who knows?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but I felt like that I did feel really inspired by that. Now, the stories that I wrote called The End of Love Story to the Universe, those were personal. And those were and there's 3 of those stories. The third one just came out a few weeks ago. Those are free to anyone. And they're a series of kind of short stories. And those were a very profound experience. So I don't know if you want to get off of the We Meet Again and get into that, or so
Well,
I'll let
those are things that you're writing. So I actually wanted to ask you about the 5 reasons why, because that book, it has these powerful insights, and that question, who doesn't ask that question in their life when they get their bad events, the worst events in your life. Why me? Why did it have to happen to that person? That person was such a good person. There's so many a-holes over here who are doing great. And this person, the great person. So can you go through those 5 reasons in that book?
Yeah, that was the first book I ever wrote. And obviously it's nonfiction. And it's funny when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason. I say, yeah, I wrote the book on it. and it came in a very difficult time in my life. So that was inspired certainly by, I had a business that failed. My house was foreclosed. I went through bankruptcy. I lost everything I had. I had a relationship end and my dog died. All of these things were happening at once. And I know a lot of people have worse things. So I don't want to act like my worst things were the worst things that you can go through. But it was enough of a crisis for me to go, okay, what in the world? This had to happen for a reason. What was the reason? And I was meditating one day and all of a sudden it was like, oh, these are the 5 reasons. It just was given to me. And so then I started doing a lot of research and read literally hundreds of books, hundreds of articles, putting all the data together to see what other people thought of that. And what I always assert on that is in that book, I have what I call 9 basic assumptions. And if those basic assumptions align with your belief system, then I'll explain every bad thing. One of those is a belief in a higher power. Now, how you define the higher power, what you call that higher power, it can be totally flexible. You can call it loving energy, or you can call it God or Allah or whatever you want to call it. But you need to believe in some sort of infinite intelligence, divine presence, whatever that is. So anyway, I just started writing the things and what they all have in common, because I don't know how much time you want to spend on the 5 reasons, but what they all have in common is to get us to change something. We're going down a specific kind of path and we need to shift. And so a lot of times a bad thing will happen in order to get us to go that direction. I don't know if that makes sense, but
makes perfect sense. Now,
yeah.
How does destiny, fate, and those kind of things, how does that work in your worldview and the way things with reincarnation and stuff? Are we predestined to something? Is it something that's chosen? What have you come across in your lifetime of dealing with or looking into this?
Yeah. First of all, I believe that we have a soul and we have a part of us that existed before we were born and will exist after we die. Even if you don't, and by the way, the 5 reasons why doesn't have anything to do with reincarnation. I mean, that fits, but you can believe, you can enjoy, you can appreciate the book without having any belief in reincarnation. But there is a need to believe that we have the soul and the soul chooses a body and then becomes us. So if my soul had chosen your body, it would be very different and vice versa. And what I believe is we have free will in 2 places. I believe that we have free will before we're born. And so we start thinking, oh, I'm going to choose that body. There was a great episode of the podcast Invisibilia. I don't know if you remember that podcast by NPR. And it was talking about a little boy, because a lot of times children will remember their previous lifetimes, especially up to the age of 4 or 5. If you ask them, who were you? A lot of times they'll answer it. And this little boy had these really clear memories of who he was in his previous lifetime. I don't know, there are thousands of cases like this. But with him, they said he talked about going to a mommy and daddy store to pick out his parents. And I thought that was like the cutest thing you can imagine. So I believe that we choose that body, we choose the family, we make some decisions like, okay, that will give us the best lessons we want to learn. That'll give me the experience. Or I want to hang with those people because I know them on the other side and we've been around the block together. So I'll go down and be with them. And I believe what we do is we create a roadmap so that it's, okay, certain key intersections, certain key people. And then once we so that's the free will in terms of deciding what that map looks like. And then we get here and then we go, okay, then we have the chance to decide, do we go right? Do we go left? Do we zoom through an intersection? Do we take the high road or the low road? Do we go off road? So I don't believe anything is like 100% predestined. I believe that we can muck up our destiny and do things that we shouldn't do. And that there's lessons on every path. And lessons are one of the 5 reasons why bad things happen, by the way. So there are lessons no matter what we do. Obviously, hopefully we'll take the high road and have better experience and higher path. But we have that choice of what to do when we're here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that was interesting there, where you talked about as a kid can tell you right away who they were. And I remember when I was a young child, I think there was more openings to things like that I could see when I was a young boy. And obviously that's gone away. But why do you think that children can see that, can talk about that, or can they have that connection, and why do you think we lose it?
I think that it's obviously not as long for them, right?
Hmm.
I also think that they are in a place of generally they haven't been told what not to believe or what to believe. Like they don't have the limitations that you're like, yeah. And of course, obviously in some households, if the parents go, no, that's not right, or no, what are you saying? That's crazy stuff, then they'll stop talking about it. Or if what's encouraged in the household is what can be nurtured and expanded. So I think it hadn't been that long. A lot of times we'll even tell you what it's like in heaven, and I just think that they just don't have the filter like we might have. They're not afraid to tell you what they remember. We get older, we're like, okay, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but as a kid, they're like their imagination and creativity galore, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's all open. Now,
Yeah.
why do you think that reincarnation happens? Is there a purpose that has to be like something that has to be done? And can you like graduate? Can you like move on? Is it kind of one of those things? Why do you think it happens?
I think that we can choose to be, and I think we have a lot of choice in it. I don't know if we have 100% choice, we might, but we have a choice, at least to some degree, of whether we come back or not. And I do think, and this I don't know for sure, but I generally do think you can evolve to a level where coming back is you can graduate or you can move on. So I do think that's possible. But I also think a lot of very higher level souls might choose to be incarnated to make a difference, to help the planet, especially the planet in need. And I don't think this is the only place where we can come. I think that the quote from the
Uh-oh.
movie Contact, I don't know if you're like, it would be an awful waste of space if we were the only planet. There might be other places to go and other experiences to have. So sometimes we go to hang out with our friends. Sometimes we go to make a difference. Sometimes we go because I know when I went through an interesting experience in my life where I needed to learn. I know there was a lesson I learned, and it was basically victimhood. What's it like to be a victim? And we've all met people who are like walking, talking victims.
They live.
They live it. And I went
Yeah.
through that about a year of that. Yes, I had been victimized, but I carried that victim banner for quite a while, for at least a year. And I really feel like that there was somewhere that I said, I want to know what that feels like. I want to check that box because that makes me able to help people who are that way. Right?
Yeah.
I can relate to that and go, I get the power of that. I understand that. So I think sometimes we might sign up to learn things so we can be guides or help to others. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's how I believe.
Miss Landrum, how do you
Yeah.
deal with, because I'm sure you deal with this, they're skeptics. People who just, they're skeptics about everything.
Yeah.
People can be skeptics about the sky being blue. They're just always skeptics. How do you approach that when you deal with a respectful skeptic?
Yeah, people can, and I never want to feel like I'm trying to talk somebody into anything, right?
Mm.
Because, and like I said, I think people can enjoy my books even if they're major skeptics. I've had people that are big fans of my novels who their religious background would say no, no, like really strict religious background. Not okay, they haven't heard it. I know you might even ask me about Christianity, but some of these people are in very strict worlds where that would just be, and they're like, and they read the books and they're kind of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But if it's not your jam, it's not your jam. Like I'll tell you an interesting story when you mentioned about the bad things happen and about how good bad things can happen to good people. You might remember that book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. I don't know if you have heard
It
about that
sounds
book.
familiar. Sounds
Yeah,
familiar.
it was written by Rabbi Harold Kushner. And I met him right after I wrote my book. And he was such a beautiful and gracious man. And he read my book. And he basically came back and said, and he disagreed. And he said he doesn't think things happen for a reason. He thinks it's random.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, is right. Especially a very spiritual man. He's a rabbi, but that is his belief. And I'm not going to change his mind, right? If that's what he believes, if that's the, but I did do something creative and that, or I don't know about creative, but I went and did some research and found that the people who believe things happen for a reason are happier than those who don't.
Yeah.
So that would be the explanation I would have on skeptics, right? If you're not into it and you don't want to look into it, don't. But if you are into exploring it, there really is some solid research. There's some really solid people who believed in it. My novels, my We Meet Again, we get a little bit into some of the history. If you remember Hippocrates and Pythagoras, I'm sorry, Pythagoras. Pythagoras was like the first big philosopher, or one of them. And then Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates were all students of Pythagoras, and they all believed in reincarnation. So a lot of people, and then if I meet somebody who's very defined, well-defined Christian, I might ask him a question like, Jesus is supposed to come back. Like, how will that happen? Isn't reincarnation the most logical way that would happen? And their mind goes, oh, wait, whoa, wait.
That
And if all I've done is that's great. And if they
that
don't agree, they don't agree.
that's an interesting paradox that you brought up. I could speak to you forever. Unfortunately, the show is coming to an end, but I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you to, because my guest always has the last word. So if you can just tell the audience how they can find you, your stuff, how they can support you, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Brownell Landrum. I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. So you Google me and you're going to find me. I have a YouTube channel. You can go to my website. You can find me. I'm most active on Facebook than I am other places. We have the Life is a Trip Facebook group. And so please join if you're interested in learning more or just reading stories or sharing stories. And hopefully you'll give a link to my The End, A Love Story to the Universe stories and my We Meet Again, and so people can check me out there and I love hearing from fans. So if people read my books and want to share, then that's great too.
Thanks again for coming on. Can you stick around after the show real quick?
Of course.
Thank you.